All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, November 13th, 2023. I've got 7 o'clock, so I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Welcome, everybody, this evening. We got a packed house. Nice to see so many faces here. We'll start first with the public arts policy, just looking for a status update and any discussion items.
I believe they met last Wednesday and are meeting this Wednesday. Is that correct? I believe 15th?
Yes, Wednesday at 6 at the Senior Center.
Again, it's a public meeting. Anybody can pop in.
Thank you. I did have a question on this, the snowplows. Am I correct that Columbus Academy students are going to be doing the snowplows?
I believe snowplows were dropped off there at the same time they were dropped off to the Gahanna High School. And just as we offered to schools, we offered to Columbus Academy, they could go ahead and come up with design and artwork for that, following what had been done in the past. We would not display them until the policy is adopted. Gahanna High School, or Gahanna Jefferson Schools decided not to paint yet. They wanted to wait until policy was adopted. Academy, I believe, is going ahead and painting them, but again, they won't be displayed until the policy is adopted.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. Nice to see that moving forward. I look forward to a policy being adopted and seeing more public art. So, anything else on that? Okay. Next up, items from the Department of Administrative Services. Good evening, Director.
I have one item for Committee of the Whole, and that is a request for an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with the Board of Health of the Franklin County General Health District for our 2024 Public Health Services contract. The City of Gahanna contracts with Franklin County Public Health to provide health services for the city and to function as our public health department. These services include administrative services, data services, environmental health, emergency preparedness, epidemiology, health promotion, health systems, planning, immunization, and a variety of many other services to the city. The cost for the 2024 program is $349,433, which is $9.89 per capita. This represents approximately a 3% increase from the 2023 contract. This also request is for emergency, so that the contract is effective on January 1st, 2024. The administration received the contract from Franklin County Public Health on November 6th, and that is the reason for the request for emergency.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion? City Attorney's Office has reviewed.
I don't know. I haven't. I don't know if Mr. Malarski has. I think, is the contract very different from the previous years?
The terms are exactly the same with the exception of the amount.
And then I think it's just worth noting that this would be a separate contract from anything that's being considered in terms of tobacco retail licensing. That would be a separate contract and a separate agreement.
Correct. There's no reference to the tobacco retail issue within this contract.
Just want to make that explicitly clear for everybody.
Appreciate that.
Well, seeing no other discussion on that, are folks okay on for first and then consent? All right. Thank you, Director. Moving right along, items from the Department of Economic Development. Good evening, Director.
Good evening, members of council. It's not There we go. How's that? Better? Good evening, everyone. The first item is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Gahanna Convention and Visitors Bureau for the years 2024 through 2028. Excuse me. For the purpose of promoting tourism and attracting visitors to the city. This evening, we have Director Lori Kappas here and some of her board members. As you all know, the sharing of bed tax revenue is required by the ORC, and this agreement does extend it for 5 years through 2028. Continuation of sharing 66.7% of the bed tax for the CVB purposes. It's basically the same agreement, except there are some minor changes to it. Section 4, the CVB had asked for clarification of responsibilities, especially as it relates to any type of termination language. Also, in the scope of services in the addendum, it outlines and specifies that certain circumstances beyond their control they will not be held responsible for, such as street closures, utility work, and things like that that might prevent them from hosting events. It also has continuation of events such as Blues and Jazz Fest and Holiday Lights, which they had taken over from the city some years ago. By the way, Holiday Lights is this Sunday on the 19th. For 2022, there was a sharing of about $248,000, and we're running just about the same for 2023. When the last 2 months are deposited, they should be in the same ballpark as last year. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any discussion on this? Yes, Ms. Padova.
So can you clarify, the contract says for 4 years, but then it says, you said 5 and it has the dates.
Yes, that would be changed to 5 because it is actually through 2028, not 4.
Okay.
So continuation for 5 years, which is, I don't know if it's unusual, but many communities, really, it's in perpetuity. They don't have end dates in some communities, but I think it's, judicial on our part to look at this every 5 years for the continuation of that as we go forward.
Okay, so it would increase from 3 years to 5 years?
That's correct.
Okay. And then since we have Lori here, would you mind giving us just like a brief overview of how, I think there are some misconceptions in the community about Gahanna's Convention and Visitors Bureau, but my understanding is that it is not different from others. So could you give us just like a little overview of how this works in other communities, if we're the same or different, kind of how that works?
Sure. Most communities all over Ohio and the nation really have a Convention and Visitors Bureau. Specifically to the Columbus area, we are members of the Capital Area Tourism Alliance, which is CVB directors from all over central Ohio. So communities like Westerville, Worthington, Reynoldsburg, Hilliard, pretty much all the communities around Columbus have a Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so in order to stay relevant and competitive, I feel like Gahanna needs to have a CVB and do the promotion work and the events and things that we do.
And is it typical for the CVB to get the bed tax dollars? Is that the typical funding method?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have.
Ms. McGregor?
And if we did not have a CVB, where would those dollars go?
It's my understanding that the dollars would go back to the county.
Thank you.
That is correct. If we did not have a CVB, Franklin County would receive the money, and we would not be able to utilize it locally. In the other communities which I served, I was on the board of the CVB, and Jen Hackman from my office serves as a board member to this organization, so she is always giving us updates about what's happening and what's going to be coming up, actually, so she does a great job.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So thank you both for the explanation. So the agreement is for essentially 2/3 of the bed tax dollars, right?
That's correct, 66.7%.
And so even without a CVB, all 100% would go back to the county, is that correct?
That's correct.
So, and then could you just explain to us where the other approximately third
Yes,
goes for us then?
that would be coming up in the next item.
Perfect.
So the next piece of legislation, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter an agreement with the Gahanna Convention Bureau for the years, again, 2024 through 2028, for the management and operation of the Herb Center. So this, again, is for 5 years. It's a continuation of sharing 16.67% of what's collected. So that would be approximately $62,000. That's what was collected last year, and probably about the same this year when we get the last 2 months in. And then the remaining 16.66%, just about $62,000 also, then the city is able to retain that.
So what I'm hearing is that these are all dollars that stay here in the city of Gahanna,
That's correct.
used to promote the city of Gahanna.
That's right.
I did have a request for this to come back to committee, both of these items, but I have no problem moving it forward with first and then consent at the same time, if that's amenable to everybody. Any other discussion on, I guess I'll say both of these items then, since,
I'd like to say that
Sandra?
it's a wonderful thing that the CVB does, and they've been working hard. I remember when it was first, we had one time that we had a, like a thing, and it's grown and grown and grown, and it's because of the people that are sitting in that row right there. So thank you so much for all that you've done. You
Having
deserve
only
that.
been here a short time, I have been impressed with what they are able to accomplish for the community in some of the events. I haven't, unfortunately, been able to be involved much because I've been busy getting my feet wet, but I hope to, this coming year, get more involved with Jen to understand what they can do and to work with them on a much closer relationship.
thank you. And I didn't mean to cut you off if you had anything else
No,
to say on
that's
the
all.
second item. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you to Director Kappas and the members of your board for being here as well. Appreciate it. Next up, this was ordinance 7723, still. Thank you.
Yes, as you had heard previously in a previous meeting, this ordinance is to allow the mayor to enter into an infrastructure construction agreement with CP Crescent LLC. As you may recall, this is for the developer to take on the improvements to Tech Center Drive and also to do the utilities along with it at Crescent and Central Park. We wanted to make an amendment to that original document to allow them also to take on the management and construction of a traffic signal in that location. This was recommended by our engineering department because they will be out there doing the work in that area. We wanted to add this to the list of items that would be comprehensively done at the same time. So that traffic signal was actually an obligation from 2010 that we are obligated to do, and they were getting ready to undertake that, and we thought that this would be much more efficient to allow them to undertake this and then pay them for the design and the construction of the traffic signal at that location.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Schnetzer?
Thank you, Mr. Director. So I just want to confirm, what's in front of us is just simply the addition of the traffic signal to
That-
an already existing authorized project. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just adding a traffic signal, nothing else, to the improvements that were already talked about as far as the little bit more than $4.3 million of improvements out there that in the contract that the mayor would enter into, the developer would pay for initially those improvements and would be paid back through the SIB loan of $2 million and then about 2.3 or 4 million in the TIF payments.
Director, if I may real quick, my understanding is that the ordinance here has had a first reading, but this would have to be an amendment to that ordinance to include the scope of the traffic signal as part of the underlying legislation. sections. Am I correct, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct.
So as a matter of process, we would need an amendment at the meeting, or at our regular council meeting. Does that address your question, Mr.
It
Schnitzer?
does, yeah. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you so much. I always support the addition of traffic signals in this work, so I definitely support this because they're traffic calming, and so that's a nice thing. But where? I was trying to look through the contract, and where are we talking about posting this?
Would you like to address that, sir? I know where, but he's the expert.
While Director Comlank is approaching, I'll just clarify that this actually, Director Hammonds mentioned the mayor agreed to. He was referring to Mayor Stinchcomb. This is an agreement that was made back in 2010 as part of the Buckles property, Tech Center Drive construction. So this is actually a fulfillment of an obligation that was made almost 13 years ago. So,
Yes, good evening. The traffic signal would be east of Hamilton Road along Tech Center Drive at the proposed Crescent Boulevard cul-de-sac servicing the multifamily site and a host of other developments in that 40 plus or minus acre development.
Okay. Makes sense.
So this would be where Ortho 1's going to be down that road?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anything else on this one? All right, so then, Mr. Clerk, if we could have this on the regular agenda so that we can do the amendment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director. Appreciate it. Item E, items from the Department of Public Service.
oh, this would be one that council actually asked to bring back.
Yes. Yes, so as I recall, thank you, Mayor, there was a request for this one to come back as there were questions about the incomplete bid that had been received among the three. I had some follow-up questions. I just want to make clear that it is included in our bid package that we publish that bids must be complete to be considered. There's not an option to say we'll provide information at a later date. And that information is clearly presented in our package. Am I correct?
That would be correct.
Did anybody else have anything else on this one?
No, that's a very standard thing,
Yeah.
and it happens all the time.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear on the record. So, I have no issue having this on consent, if folks are okay with that. All right, thank you. All right, next item. I believe this one is new to us. Utility rates?
Yep.
Oh, yes. I didn't see you sneak up there. I'm looking.
He's stealth.
All right, so good evening, Council. Corey Weibensinger, Senior Deputy Director of Administrative Services, presenting this on behalf of the Department of Public Service. So every year, the Department of Public Service reviews Gahanna code and fee schedules, looking for necessary updates and revisions to ensure that we remain current and that our rates are applicable. Code changes requested for this year are routine annual changes and are minor in nature. In consultation with Baker Tilly, a rate study has been done over the last few years that we just completed, which has led some additional adjustments to some of our connection fees, frontage fees, and other minor revenue producing services for water and sewer. Attached, you will see there is an outline of the proposed code changes, together with the red line version. These changes are being brought forth at this time due to the timing of the City of Columbus Department of Public Utilities rate recommendation to their Sewer and Water Advisory Board, which occurs annually around the third week of October. That is when we really know what they're going to be charging us, that we then have to adjust our rates for our residents as well. And is being brought forward in alignment with the budget that you'll see later tonight with the Finance Committee. The Sewer and Water Advisory Board in City of Columbus is recommending in their 2024 budget to raise sewer rates by 6% and water rates by 5% for all their customers. This would include master meter.
That's not correct.
Oh, that was at the advisory board. Is it?
That's not, they're raising it, the sewer by 5% and the water by 5%, and the storm by 1%.
Okay. So over the next few years, the projected sewer increases are said to peak around 6% through 2026 and remain around 6% annual increase beyond 2026. And water increases to peak around 8% between 27 and 30. These rate increases are a result of many factors, such as increased prices in materials, chemicals, EPA requirements, and increase in debt repayment with capital-related projects. To cover the City of Columbus rate increases for the water, sanitary, and the CCO, which is the Columbus Consent Order, operational expenses, and to make sure we are minimizing future rate spikes for our residents, which may be caused by some of our capital projects here as well. We are proposing a 7% overall rate increase for all our utilities. That would include water, sanitary, storm, the CCO, and refuge. This rate increase equates to $7.63 increase per month based on an average consumption of 4,000 gallons. Typically, that's around a family of four. That's our average usage. So anybody using less than that would not see that $7.63 increase. Overall, again, this is inclusive of water, sanitary, stormwater, and the CCO and refuge fees. Just a side note, roughly 80% of what we collect for water and sewer is essentially a pass-through to Columbus to pay for the consumption. The City of Gahanna water and sewer area keeps around 20% to maintain our operations. And for the refuge, approximately 95% actually goes to our provider. The City of Gahanna retains around 5% for our administration of that contract as well. Even with these proposed increases, Gahanna's 2024 rates will remain competitive and will fall mid-range compared to our neighboring communities. And again, there is no rate increase for refuge services being recommended at this time under the current agreement. Our utility billing division will still be offering discount programs as they're eligible for senior discounts on our garbage or refuse. And as long as City of Columbus still honors the water and sewer for low income as well. To implement these updates, the administration is respectively requesting that City Council pass ordinances to authorize the proposed code changes and the fee schedule updates. To ensure that the code and fee schedules are active and eligible for billing by January 1, we are requesting that the ordinances be passed with emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion? Mr. Renner?
Yeah, so it's something I know a little bit about. Was there any review, and please, I understand because Columbus actually published through their SWAB, although I don't know how widely it's published about their projected sewer and water rates into the future. Water and sewer is getting ready to be very expensive in Central Ohio. And in order to protect the Gahanna citizens, what I was wondering is number one, was there any modeling done to understand that behavior versus what we need, and we can actually have some kind of supplemental or help, subsidization, I should say, from the general fund? And then number two is we need to be broadcasting what the city is telling its communities. And we need to get in front of that and help try to tell the story about how expensive water, especially water, but water and sewer is getting ready to be.
So yes, so part of the Baker Tilly study that we've been working through does forecast out what we are able to attain from the city of Columbus. It is not often easy to get, you won't get anything in writing to us that actually says what their plan is. We attend the SWAB boards in order to depict their conversations as to what they are anticipating through those conversations. We do build in our projection module with Baker Tilly out to around 2030 where we think these are going to go. What is involved in this $7.63 increase for consumption is a heavier shift to our capital projects than that has been in the past. We have a lot of capital projects identified under the CIP that we've been working through that has really helped us understand a lot of our projects that are going to be coming on board. Now that we have our senior utility resource engineer and Director Comlick that are helping us with that path and plan. So what we're recommending actually helps us on the capital side as well, as we know. We want to avoid, let's say, to the best of our ability, taking on extra debt, whether it is a loan from the general fund or if it is a water association loan. We are exploring grant opportunities as well that have just come out, trying to minimize any impact we can on the rates that directly affect every resident and business that we have here in our community. For the publication of it, I would say doing our best to talk about rates when a lot of those changes are out of our control. For operating the amount of lines that we do with our staff, for the 20 rough percent that we get, they do an amazing job here of the public service area.
Okay. Do you have access to the Sewer and Water Advisory Board, the presentation, the PowerPoint that they presented?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. They forwarded it to me after the presentation. Yep.
Good, good. The sooner that we get in front of this and actually talk to residents and help people understand the value, they're going to hear 7%, but we need to help them understand, you know, what it is that they're actually getting, right? So if you need me to out Columbus some more, I will. Some people in this era, dais actually knows that I do that.
Okay.
So.
Mrs. McGregor. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, if I could, thank you, apologize. Thank you for pointing that out. I think a lot of the people in the community do not realize that essentially most of what they pay is pass-through. We have to pay the city of Columbus for the water, and that is a conversation we have with our residents a lot. So I do appreciate your recommendation, and maybe we can have a conversation too. It's maybe if you have some suggestions as to how we can frame that, given your own experience.
Your sustainability committee is also another point that we need to actually harp on this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Mrs. McGregor.
Most of the increases are sort of minimal. I mean, but the water capital improvement rate, it went up like 3 times. Why?
Yeah. And that is projecting out what we have for water line maintenance and projects that are coming on board. And that's why that rate was substantially lower than some of the neighboring communities as well, and understanding what type of revenue do we need to bring in to be able to build beyond just our maintenance program, but to prepare for some of these projects that are coming up. You know, our infrastructure here is aging, and in certain areas highly aged. And what we don't want to do is wait until we have major projects and we have a large spike in what we have to charge for the the funding for the water and sewer projects.
Okay.
So this helps us get more than just the maintaining side, but start working on some of these larger projects that we have as well.
Anything else on this item? All right, are we good with first and then consent on this one then?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Director. All right, next up, items from the Department of Parks and Recreation. Good evening.
I think we're already on. Good evening. The city was awarded a refreshed grant in the amount of $20,000 from the National Recreation and Parks Association, partnered with Niagara Bottling. The city was eligible due to a grant that was received in 2019 through NRPA for the construction of the 2 basketball courts at Sun Point Park. There was not a match requirement for this grant. The only stipulation, I shouldn't say the only stipulation, there was a stipulation that the grant was to be applied to the same location as the original award. The grant funds will be used to design a human sundial at Sun Point Park. With that, administration is respectfully requesting an ordinance to increase the capital improvement fund from the unappropriated unencumbered balance in the amount of $20,000.
Any discussion?
I do.
Mr. Renner?
Thank you so very much for bringing this forward. If you recall, I was on the naming committee for that park, and the sundial was definitely part of our vision, so thank you. This is going to be really a lot of fun.
Yep. We're excited to see it come to fruition.
Thank you, Director, and I'll just say, always appreciate when we can win grants and bring those dollars to the city, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further for Committee of the Whole before I turn things over to Mr. Schnitz? Oh, yes, on this one, are we good with first and then consent?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Seeing no further discussion for Committee of the Whole, we'll adjourn that and turn things over to Finance.
Sure. Way to keep them in line there, Jeremy.
We're good.
All right. Okay. With that, let's kick off Finance Committee for November 13th, 2023. We just have one item on the agenda today, and that is the presentation of the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. I assume, directors, that the floor is yours. Do you have anything for the overhead here? Okay, all right. Just connecting to the system.
Good evening, everybody. Favorite time of year, we're going to talk about the budget. Is everybody excited? Yeah, I know I am.
We all have smiles on our face, don't we? Let's go.
So we're going to talk about a couple things here. We're going to talk about the factors that influence the 2024 budget, the summary of the general fund request, what that impact is on general fund balance, kind of what our 5-year view looks like for the general fund. We're going to go over the summary of the 3 special funds: public safety, Parks and Recreation, and Public Service. We're going to talk about our capital request and what the upcoming request is for some initiatives in 2024.
So Joanne, can I jump in real quick? Mm-hmm. Do you have any issues with maybe pausing in between the funds for any questions that might arise?
Nope, I'll stop and ask questions.
Thank
Yep,
you.
sure thing. So starting with the factors that influence the budget, we have the economy, nationally and locally. Locally, we're expanding. Recent projects with ADB SafeGate coming to completion, and then the addition of Ortho 1, and just the Columbus area in general is predicted to continue to grow. Nationally, we have some good indicators. Unemployment's still low. We're seeing some little bit of confidence growing a little bit, but we still have an inverted yield curve and some items that are still pointing to a potential recession or slowdown. But we're not anticipating that to really impact Gahanna or the Central Ohio region based on the strong economic growth that we're currently seeing. As far as inflation, we are seeing that kind of tamp down a little bit. It's still not at the federal level that they're wanting of 2%. So until that happens, interest rates are expected to remain high, and definitely through the first quarter of 2024, those interest rates are expected to remain high. Looking at the capital improvement plans, this is the first budget cycle where we're basing the capital plan based on the adopted capital improvement plan. We have our organizational structure that's considered each year. So each year, the departments meet with the senior directors, IT and HR managers, and a finance team member. We talk about current workload, current staffing levels, vacancies, initiatives that they may be having coming up, and is there a need for additional staff or a change in organization. Miranda's going to discuss some of those staffing changes after I'm done with my presentation. And then we look at our current labor. So all three of our union contracts were negotiated in 22 and 23. So they have set negotiated increases of 3.25% this year. We're also proposing that those unclassified or non-union members who are at the midpoint also receive that same 3.25% increase. And then, of course, we do have those staffing changes that I'll discuss later. Looking at the workforce in general, unemployment's still low, but we're kind of seeing that maybe some of those individuals are coming off the sidelines, but there's still plenty of jobs to go around, so we have to make sure that we're staying competitive. Jumping into general fund revenue, so we're expecting about $34.4 million for the general fund, an increase of about 8%, or about $2.7 million. To the right there, you'll see that as a governmental entity, the majority of our resources are taxes, with 71% coming from income tax, followed by real estate taxes at 7%. Kind of looking at that $2.7 million increase and what's driving that, the largest part of that is going to be income tax. Again, we talked about the economic growth in the area, and we're anticipating that to remain into 2024. So expecting a 4% increase in income tax. Second largest increase is that investment income. So again, expecting those interest rates to stay high. So this 2.5 is actually in line with what we're actually realizing. If you remember the last quarterly report I brought, it looked like we were going to exceed our expectations. So this is bringing us more in line with what we're actually realizing for 2023, expecting those rates to stay pretty much the same. And we're also positioned very well to take advantage of those higher interest rates. The third largest item, kind of leading that increase, is charges for services. So we have a couple things. Parks and Recreation, they're back to pre-pandemic levels and maybe in some cases exceeding that. So we're expecting with the growth in the area for that demand to stay. So we're expecting to see those park rentals and those field rentals increase a little bit going into 2024. We also have proprietary administrative fees. So that same Baker-Tilly study that Corey was talking about, they also looked at how we were charging those proprietary funds for the administrative services that the governmental funds provide to them. So with that change in the calculation, it's bringing in about $461,000 more. So those are the three main items that are driving that increase. And just as something to look at, if you notice there's that large increase for other revenue, and I just wanted to mention the success of the Central Ohio Healthcare Consortium. We are a member for our insurance benefits. They've not only been able to keep our rates below industry standards, but they've also been able to provide us with premium holidays over the years, which we're getting another one for 2024. In addition to that premium holiday, we're also getting a return on investment from their excess reserves. So this other revenue reflects $133,000 coming back from the Central Ohio Healthcare Consortium. We're going to return both that premium holiday and this return on investment to our employees in the form of wellness. So within the budget request, these dollars will be used to expand the wellness program and also offset the cost for the near-site wellness center. Before I move on to appropriations, any questions on revenue?
Anything from council on the general fund summary? Hearing none.
Moving on to the appropriation request, so looking at about 34.2 million in appropriations, an increase of about 12%. As a service organization, you'll notice on the right, the majority of our expenses are for salaries and benefits at 64%, followed by contract services at 23%. The majority of that 12% increase is coming from salaries and benefits. As we had already talked about, we have those 3.25% salary increases coming through. We do have a 5% increase for insurance premiums, and then we also have some new positions that we'll go over later. The other part of that increase is contract services. So we had a couple increases that we were aware of with the Franklin County Health contract, risk and property insurance. Then we also, with that, had some mosquito spray that came in higher. But then there's some new initiatives in there. As we had discussed earlier, we do have some things that we're proposing, strategic plan, sustainability plan, economic development update. And then we also have some other initiatives that we'll go over towards the end here. Any questions on appropriations?
Hearing none.
So what is the impact on the general fund balance based on the planned revenues and the appropriations that we're requesting? We have about 34.4 million coming in. We're requesting to use about 34.2 million. So we're anticipating that we're going to add back about 235,000 to fund balance. Kind of going over to that right side of the slide, we're showing that emergency reserve calculated as 25% of operating appropriations of 33.6 million. That is an increase of $1 million to our emergency reserve. So looking at how we're planning on ending the year, kind of here to the center, we're anticipating that we're going to have about 28.1 million in unreserved fund balance. Taking out that 8.45 of the emergency reserve leaves us with an unassigned unreserved fund balance of about 19.7 million. That's a little bit more than 3 times of what the minimum is required by policy. As you may recall, at a minimum, we are to maintain 2 months of operating expenses. This is equivalent to about 7 months of operating expenses. So kind of looking at how we're tracking over the next 5 years. So what we do is we look at this very conservatively. So we're anticipating that expenditures are going to continue to grow as they are for 2024. We're not taking into consideration any contract changes, any employment changes, no turnover, just assuming that we're going to continue growing on the expenditure side the way we are. We have a little more control over that. On the revenue side, we're still planning some growth, but a little less growth than on the expenditure side. The reason why we do that is because we know that we have less control on the revenue resource. So thinking of our largest revenue resource is income tax. There's always economic pressures on that. A constant need to retain and attract business, very vulnerable to those economic pressures. So as we create this 5-year projection, we're assuming that we're going to have some negative pressures on revenues. Each year, this is adjusted based on actual activity and what we're anticipating for the next year. So right now, we're looking at 2026, maybe that year that we need to look at expenditures and revenues, whether we need to generate more revenue or reduce expenditures. As this gets updated, it might move closer on the timeline or further, depending on what we're seeing actually kind of play out. Any questions on the general fund?
Anything from council? So Joanne, with regard to, and I fully understand kind of the imperfect nature of the model, right? I mean, it's the crystal ball is quite hazy and sometimes cracked. Can you pinpoint maybe 1 or 2 things that are driving, I suppose, the mismatch between revenues and, well, I should say, estimated revenues and estimated expenditures there in 2026? Is there one kind of key thing?
So what I kind of looked at when we laid out this 5-year model is looking at the economic expansion that we're currently in and looking at what Gahanna actually has available to continue that economic expansion. So as we kind of projected revenue out into those out years, we're still planning some growth, but then pulling it down a little bit, knowing that we don't have a large expansive area for economic development to happen. In addition, we're not quite sure, what's going to happen with the businesses that are here. But the main driver of reducing that increase in revenue as we moved into the out years is really developable space.
Okay.
Do we have the space to continue the growth that we are currently experienced to go on into those out years?
Okay, thank you.
So now we're going to move on to the 3 special funds. They split that 25% of the 1% increase. So we're going to start off with the Public Safety Fund. You notice I kind of talked about income tax increasing, but in this case, we see that 12% decrease. That's related to the change in allocation of the income tax. So when we look at all 3 of these funds each year, we look at the net operating cost of each of them, and then we allocate the income tax proportionately based on what that net operating cost is. So in this particular year, public safety needs less of those dollars, so they're being allocated less. So that's why you're seeing that decrease, even though we're talking about income tax increasing. Looking at the expenditure side, the main program that's run out of here is the School Resource Officers Program. So with the expansion in the area and the school district continuing to grow, we do believe that there will be a need to potentially modify that arrangement to give the schools the safety that they're wanting for their staff and students. So we do have planned an additional school resource officer, and then as those kind of modifications may occur, you might see some changes on the expense and revenue side. The other big piece that comes out of this fund, you'll see this transfer out of a little over $1 million here towards the bottom. So that's for police pension. So we do receive property tax that comes in to offset a portion of the police pension, and then this fund transfers the remainder over to fully pay for that cost of the police pension. We also have the mental health liaison that's paid out of this fund, and the community liaison officer. Any questions on public safety?
Anything from council?
No. How many of the public safety people are going to be retiring? Do we know, do we have that amount?
In 2024,
Uh-huh.
I believe it's 1.
Oh, it's just one, okay.
Well, it's 1 that we are aware of, but anybody can retire or resign at any time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything further from council on that? No? All right, please continue.
Moving on to Parks and Recreation, so seeing that increase for income tax. Also, again, as we discussed, we're seeing that demand for programs and activities meeting or exceeding pre-pandemic levels. So planning on that translating over to this fund also and increased charges for services revenue. With that increased demand for programs and activities, you're also going to have an increase in expenditures to provide that. So that's where you're seeing the largest part of their increase is coming from salaries and benefits and materials and supplies to have those programs and activities in place. Also on the salaries and benefits side, we kind of righted the seasonal budget request. When we started 2023, we were concerned about filling all the positions that were needed. There were still some concerns about maybe some closures or slowdowns because of the pandemic, but we really just had a really good season. So the increase for the seasonal budget staff is more aligning that with the need for these programs and activities. Any questions on Parks and Recreation?
Council? All right, thank you.
Finally, the last special revenue fund is public service. So this mainly houses the engineering department, also has some garage maintenance in it. So seeing that they have a larger increase in income tax, they do have a larger request than the other 2 funds, seeing that their appropriations are increasing by 66%. So they got a larger allocation of the income tax. Some of that is coming from salaries and benefits, again, those increases that we had talked about and some new staff. But the majority of their increase is from the contract services. So they have quite a few initiatives that they're proposing for 2024. They have the thoroughfare plan. They have a bridge and culvert assessment plan. They have a sign reflectability assessment that's going to be going on, and then they have some code updates. So that's really the main initiatives that are driving that large increase for contract services. Any questions on public service?
Anything from council? So Joanne, real quick, with regard to not just this fund, but the prior two, the special revenue funds. I know we have at least one council member elect in attendance here, as well as anybody else that might be enthralled by the budget presentation that would be viewing online. Correct me if any of this is inaccurate, but for every, let's just make it easy, every $2.50 of income tax that the city receives, $1.50 flows to the general fund per statute, and then 75 cents flows to the capital improvement fund, and then there's 25 cents left over that is allocated across these three funds. However, I guess the allocation of that 25 cents can vary depending on which programs are basically paid out of these funds. Is that accurate?
Correct.
All right, and so that would be what would account for why you see perhaps a 4% projected income tax increase or growth in the general fund, but in some of the special revenue funds, you could see either higher or lower growth anticipated because those dollars flow to specific programs. Is that, okay? All right,
Correct.
perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So now moving on to our capital request. Council adopted the first capital improvement plan by ordinance 0060 in August of 2023. This identified a long-term look at our need for capital improvements and maintenance, created the Capital Advisory Committee for ongoing monitoring and recommendations for the plan, and then really established what we needed was those policies and procedures for project identification, classification, prioritization, approval, monitoring, closeout, and most importantly, what it did was aligned resources to make sure that what we're requesting in capital each year has resources aligned that could fully see those capital items to completion. So even though it was a citywide capital improvement plan, the majority does come from the capital improvement fund. So that's the one that we're going to focus on as far as numbers. So looking at that income tax, we got the increase that was planned for the year. You also see there's a large increase in the capital outlay that's being requested. If you recall, in 2023, we only chose to fund priority items and those projects that were currently in play. And that was intentional so we could complete the capital improvement plan. So that's why you're seeing that large increase. Was 2023 was small on purpose while we finished the plan, and now this is the first full year of that adopted capital improvement plan. On page 111 of your booklets, it starts to talk about the capital improvement fund and what those are. And there's a listing of each identified project in there. What we're showing for this particular presentation is just by category. How are we spending those dollars? So we would refer back to the budget book and also to the capital improvement plan, which is located on our website, to get more information about what are all the projects within this transportation. And then the capital improvement plan then has detailed project sheets that talk about each of those. So just looking by category, and this is citywide. So citywide, we're planning on spending about $19.9 million. And this is listed in order by the largest spend to the lowest. So majority are $7.3 million going towards transportation and mobility. Kind of taking that same view in a chart view, looking at that same $19.9 million, the three areas that we're spending the majority of those capital dollars, again, transportation, mobility, trails, paths, and other surfaces, and then the water infrastructure system. Any questions on capital?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Director. Thank you very much. Could you go back a slide for me, please? Thank you. So could you help explain and I think I'm following along, but I just want to double check here. So we had a conversation earlier about utility rates, but that those are different dollars than what would be funding any improvements to sanitary sewers and storm sewers here.
No, those are the capital dollars.
Those are
Because
the
if you
capital.
think about the capital improvement plan, it's citywide across all funds. So this slide here is just representing the 13.7 million that's just coming out of capital improvement. That would not include any of those proprietary capital projects. Proprietary funds should remain whole and should support their capital and operations. So right now, the only capital plan for those proprietary funds is coming out of those capital proprietary funds. So this 19.9 million represents the 13.7 plus all the other funds throughout the city that have capital coming out of them.
It says fund at the top. I see why that's a bit of a head scratcher. It said plan overview instead of fund overview.
Yes. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So kind of wrapping up and going over, again, some of those initiatives that are planned in this 2024 budget. So we're going to begin the construction phase of 825 Tech Center. We have the citywide strategic plan, which will be driven by community input. We have the citywide sustainability plan. We'll have new economic development plan. Those code updates for public service and engineering. Continuing the redevelopment of the Creekside District Park and Plaza, and then we'll have the continued facility assessments for operations in the Parks Complex. Any other questions before we switch over to the staffing request?
Anything from council on the budget? All right, moving right along.
Hold on a second.
Good evening again. This presentation will be an overview of the 2024 staffing recommendations as request is found in the budget book. Additional details on the staffing request can be found in the department narratives of the budget book. And then if you have questions throughout, please feel free to ask those. So I gave to Clerk Van Meter a handout of this so you can see the org charts that I know you all love up close because they're very difficult to see on the screen. So the items marked in yellow throughout this presentation are 2024 new positions requested, and the items marked in blue are existing. So first, I'm going to go through all departments even if there's no staffing requests. So this is the citywide org structure that was funded in the 2023 budget and will remain consistent throughout 2024. The next slide here is the mayor's office. So there are 3 positions requested under the mayor's office. The management analyst 2 you see under the senior deputy director there. This position will work to create, build, and maintain the city's sustainability plan and will also assist in locating and applying for grants on the city's behalf. In addition, under this section, under the Department of Administrative Services, there's a request for an administrative coordinator to assist with high-level administrative tasks for the departments of IT, finance, and HR, as well as supporting the senior directors. In marketing and communications, there's a request for one additional marketing and communications specialist to assist to manage and coordinate the city's multiple social media channels and overall social media engagement with citizens, and to be responsible for updating and managing the city's newly designed website. The next department is public safety, and you'll see in your packet you have the org chart for public safety. It will not fit on the screen. It is very large, so I'll make sure Clerk Van Meter has that to attach to the agenda. So what you can see in that org chart are requests for 2 police sergeants and 1 school resource officer. The additional police sergeants would be assigned to patrol to allow for significantly improved supervisory coverage and field services. The 2 new sergeants will allow the division to guide and develop the new workforce while reducing liability to the city more closely. This also assists with a relief factor. As of right now, there are only 4 sergeants assigned to patrol, so when one of those sergeants is on leave or their days off, we're using an officer in charge instead of a trained supervisor. So like I said before, these 2 sergeants will reduce liability to the city and help monitor and develop that new workforce. As Director Burry mentioned earlier when she was going over the Public Safety Fund, there's a request for an additional school resource officer which is necessary to address and prepare for the increasing number of students and staff within the Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools. The next slides go over the departments of HR and Finance and Mayor's Court, and there are no additional staffing requests for 2024 in these 3 departments. On slide 9 is information technology. There's a request for an IT support specialist 2 to serve as a second-tier level of support. Over the past few years, we've added additional staff, and as we add additional staff, multiple different technologies are getting deployed as well as different technology projects. So there's a need to address a second level tier of support, and also this position will serve as a project technical specialist on IT projects that require the IT department. The next slide is engineering. There's a request for an administrative assistant to help with the various administrative tasks of the department, such as answering phones, assisting with resident communication for the projects, street, sidewalk, and utility, finance-related items, bid processes, and other variety of administrative tasks associated with the increased capital funding for next year. Slide 11 is the Department of Public Service. For public service, you'll see the addition of a maintenance worker 1 under the streets division. This position will be vital as this department works towards the implementation of a leaf collection program for 2024. Under the fleet division, you'll see a request for a fleet technician, bringing the total to 5. This position's needed is essential for succession planning. We have 3 tenured employees with planned retirements in 2024 and 2025. So this is a request to increase staffing temporarily to 5 with the plan to go back to 4 as those employees have their retirements. In addition, Fleet Superintendent and Senior Deputy Director Weibensinger has been working in conjunction with Eastland Fairfield Career and Technical Schools to develop workforce development through their automotive and agricultural diesel program-related programs. So there's a request for 2 fleet interns to work with Eastland Fairfield on workforce development to get qualified folks in for the fleet technician program. On slide 12 for planning, there's a request to add 1 building inspector. This building inspector will assist in reducing the reliance on third-party consultants for building inspection, and will also help keep the city's permit costs low and increases our ability to perform last-minute inspections. The city currently has 1 building inspector, so this would be an increase to add it to 2. The next 2 slides are parks and recreation. So first, we'll talk about recreation. Under the special events supervisor, there's a request to add a recreation coordinator 2 to expand the special events and volunteered programs as outlined in the Parks Master Plan. In addition, you'll see the request for a project administrator 1 with dedicated capital dollars. There's ongoing planning and execution of capital projects under the Parks Department. Multiple projects occur simultaneously, and each requires review and field evaluations to provide accountability to the contracted scope of work. So this position will work in conjunction with the project manager to ensure those parks and recreation projects are being handled appropriately. For the Division of Parks, again, you'll see the project administrator up there at the top, and there's a request for a maintenance worker 2 in the forestry section. With the implementation of the street tree program, this will require additional staff to maintain and expand the services provided by the Arbor Division. In addition, there's a request for a maintenance worker full-time for the golf course. This position is cost neutral as it will take 2 part-time vacancies, which we will eliminate to create 1 full-time. This position will focus on maintenance, primarily at the golf course, under the direction of the golf course supervisor.
Anything from council? Mrs. McGregor.
Do we have room for all these positions, I mean, a place to put them before we move to the new building?
Yes, so Director Schultz and I work on that weekly, and our facilities foreman, Adam Grove, helps us out tremendously using some assets we have at 825 to turn some offices into shared work locations.
Anything further from council, staff? All right, hearing none. I guess with regard to path forward, certainly happy to facilitate, I guess prior submission and aggregation of questions to me if you want to go that route. If you've got alternative suggestions, I'm open to that as well. And then I guess the other thing that we need to at least think about is what's our cadence of meetings. I assume it's probably going to take a week to 10 days to digest most of what is in there. So I think we could probably forgive ourselves for not talking about the budget next Monday, but I would certainly think the Monday after that, we would automatically schedule a meeting. And then do we want to go every week from there on out? Just put a tickler on the calendar with Mr. Van Meter to just go ahead and schedule finance basically every Monday.
Mr. Chair, that works for me. Does that get us where we need to be in terms of make sure we have the necessary public hearings on it is all?
Mr. Van Meter, do you want to weigh in on that?
So right now, the council schedule in December, December 4th would be a target date for a first reading. You could do first public comment then. Another public comment opportunity would be next Monday, November 20th. Otherwise, you would have 2 public comments, first reading and second reading, just right before you adopt on December 18th.
I don't think that's unprecedented. We've had that before.
Okay.
So does that sit well with council? Public hearings the 4th and the 18th? And basically, we would have at a minimum finance committee meetings, the 27th of November, the 4th of December, and the 11th of December, with any, I guess, special meetings that need to occur as we come up on additional need. Does that sound like it works? Okay. All right, I'll just send an email to everyone kind of outlining the process, just to kind of get it in print.
When did the public comments, when were the public comments?
4th and the 18th
Okay.
of December. All square? Yeah, Mr. Weaver.
Just real quick, Mr. Chair, I believe in years past, the practice has been for elected members or members-elect to be able to participate. I know Ms. Padova and I were able to submit questions as well. Is that practice going to continue?
Yeah, certainly happy to, again, at minimum, we have 1 council member-elect. Feel free to shoot any questions that you may have about the budget. Always helps if you notate the page number. And then we'll kick it around up here as far as discussion and get it kind of in the public domain.
Thank you.
Anything further from council? All right, thus concludes finance. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.